My presentation is entitled the Academic Language Feedback Toolkit, in this presentation I will focus on the collaboration between us, academic language and literacy development advisors, and academics. I will be talking about students a lot because I can't talk about feedback and language if I don't talk about students as well as academics. So here we go. Forgot. I'll need to press here. So before I start, I'll have to give you information about the context of the presentation and our academic language and literacy development advising situation. I am an academic language and literacy development advisor in the Faculty of Education at Monash University. And I'm afraid my animations are not working, so I'll have to see if Michael can do anything about it. I can probably share my screen. Michael, are you there? Give me another second. I think it worked okay last time I checked, so give me another second. Sorry about that, everyone. You should hear me now. Hi all. Can you hear me? Can you see my slides? Sorry about that. Michael, I'm sharing my screen now so I can have my animations. I'm not sure what happened. Last time I checked it was okay. Okay, I'll go on. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was talking about the context, and I wanted to give you a little bit of the information about the background. And we have a big faculty of education here at Monash University. And my faculty is one of the dinosaurs. We do have two faculty, academic language and literacy development staff, who only work with students and academics in the faculty of education. The faculty is spread across 4 campuses. There are lots of flexi modes where there is a combination of online and face-to-face teaching and learning. We have offshore students, and we, as I said, have a large student population. Rakib Chowdhury and myself are the 2 academic language and literacy development staff in the faculty, and we work with mostly with high degrees by research students, but recently we started paying attention to what was happening in coursework degrees, especially in the Bachelor of Education honors courses, our undergraduate courses. Again, to provide some extra information, we have a wonderful team of learning skills advisors who work in the library. They do have subject teams with librarians and learning skills advisors allocated to particular faculties, but all the activities take place in the library. We do collaborate a lot. There are multiple attempts to embed academic language and literacy development in the courses, but there is a big but. For such a large university with large numbers of international students and, more importantly, non-native speakers in domestic cohorts, Monash does not have an English language center. It does have extracurricular activities which were introduced the year before, and they're being expanded, but strictly speaking, not a single person at Monash is an English language advisor, if it makes sense, because I know the situation may be different in other institutions. So this made me think about the needs of our students. You have probably gathered I'm not a native speaker of English. I came here as an international student several years ago. I did my postgrad in English as an international language and intercultural communication. I've been teaching English for many years. I've been a student at Monash. I've taught at Monash. I've marked thesis at Monash. And I had too many questions that didn't have answers. So in 2013, in November 2013, I went to a conference of the Association of Academic Language Advisors here in Melbourne, and I was surprised to hear about wonderful things that were happening, which were happening in other universities, and that's where the ideas of the pilot programs came from. So I do need to acknowledge the Association for Academic Language and Learning in Australia for giving me all these ideas and support. What I'm going to talk about will probably sound familiar. I'm very happy that I attended the previous session, because the questions that were raised and the details of student cohorts that were shared with us, they do reflect the situation at Monash University. I was very lucky to find a skillful person in the business intel services at Monash University who was able to provide the reports that I required. I've always had questions about the language abilities and academic language abilities of our students, but with 6,000 students, I wouldn't know whether I was seeing the worst all the time or whether I was seeing the best all the times, because there were individual referrals or self-referrals from students in different degrees. Sometimes supervisors would contact myself or my colleague to say, can you please see this student? Is there anything you can do for them? So I started looking into this, and I wanted to share something with you which I thought was quite helpful, especially when I talked to our academics who kept talking about deficiencies of international students to myself and my colleague, and they seemed to think that it was only the international students in our faculty who were having problems with academic language and transitioning into universities. So as you can see from the table on your screens, I hope you can see this, there are those hidden factors that we are not always aware of when we talk about any specific student cohort. This table doesn't tell us the ability levels of students who belong to the cohort with non-English language background. It was based on the language they speak at home most. So you can also see that for our Master of Teaching cohort, the situation is slightly different, with larger numbers of international students, especially in our early childhood education program. But again, there are students coming from English language backgrounds who are international students, and there are students, domestic students, who are never provided with too much additional support because they are assumed to have required levels of proficiency and literacy. So having looked into this and actually having looked at the possible numbers of students who may be having issues with transitioning into the academic language discourse in education, the first pilot was run in 2014, and I will talk about it just a little bit later. So what exactly does this mean? I'll let you read something and try to think about the feedback that you would provide to a student like this. Would you be so kind to type in a couple of comments that you would provide to a student like that? It actually is linked to the previous presentation, and I thought it was great that that previous presentation was first. Yes, tenses. I would call them verb forms as well, because to me there is a difference between a student who is trying to decide between past and present tenses and those who are not sure about active or passive forms. Yes, secondary referencing as well as, yeah, mostly secondary referencing. Yes, definitely. Okay, I'm about to show you the comment that the lecturer provided. I don't want to sound as if every single lecturer would do things like this, but unfortunately this is something that we come across quite often. No, typos are fine. You can hear me. I don't think I even notice. Okay, you ready? If we had a 3-hour session here, I would have probably asked you to respond to an online survey and tell me how helpful this comment was. To me, that comment demonstrated lack of understanding on the lecturer's part on what the students should be doing next. There are different extremes. What we found when we started talking to lecturers and academics was that some of them thought it was someone else's responsibility to be looking into language needs of the students who've been accepted in the course. There were others who were saying that students like this shouldn't be in our courses. And let me remind you that we teach teachers. We are talking about students who in 2 years' time would be teaching in local schools and kindergartens. Exactly. So proofreading means different things to different people, even academic language advisors like ourselves. And I've heard previous presenters describing proofreading as a possibly formative process. To me, this is these two are not always tied together. To me, formative is feedback, or rather feed forward. Having been in the shoes of a student like this, I did come with a high level of proficiency. I had 7.5 in IELTS before half points for speaking and writing were introduced. So that was quite good, I think, but I did struggle. And I was trying to find a way to help lecturers understand what their student needs may be, without making them think that I want them to be language teachers. And I also wanted the students to be active agents of their own learning. I'm sitting in a chair of a person who was an academic language and literacy advisor in the faculty 12 years ago, who was explaining things to me, making comments on margins, meeting me regularly, talking about the paragraph structure, talking about the sentence structure. And it did change the way I write. It changed the way I thought when I was writing in English. So it was very important. Okay? So this is what today is about. And To me, and we've looked at students' needs for quite a while. To me, detail of the feedback was important, and I also was aware of the fact that there was a thing called too much feedback. I remember apologizing to students before showing my feedback pages to them, saying that they will see a lot of red or purple comments on their pages, and they were very grateful. They actually wanted more, but they wanted more if they knew what to do with it next. Okay, so as a result, my baby was born. Imagine if you are a student who has started a degree at an English-speaking university. You don't have to be an international student. That was just one of the extreme examples of student writing and inappropriate comments provided by the lecturer. Imagine that you don't really know what people mean when they talk about academic language. It was very interesting to see that what people meant by academic language in all our conversations. So as a result, and I'll show you in the next several slides how this guide came along and how the components or elements were added to it. This guide seemed to be a one-page summary of what academic language means to people in education. A disclaimer, I believe in discipline-specific academic language development, and I do understand that different disciplines may have different ideas and requirements, but we tried to create almost a rubric that was comprehensive, detailed enough for students to work with, as well as for staff to understand the differences between different components. So imagine the student who would be getting feedback on the writing that you show on slide 2, where the elements which they need to work on would be highlighted on a rubric like that. I'll give you a minute to just have a look and see whether you would agree that was something that that student needed to work on. Maybe not all, maybe not everything is highlighted. But imagine, this is the feedback that students get when they open the assignments that are now submitted in electronic formats here at Monash, mostly PDFs, and what students get are sometimes just highlighted rubrics at the end of their pieces. Sometimes they do get in-text comments, but it depends on an individual lecturer and their linguistic and cultural background. So I do have feedback from students who say how wonderful it was to receive detailed feedback like that, to know what areas they needed to work on. To me, what was important was that once someone has received language-rich or language-focused feedback like that, once they do, I really wanted them to do something with it. And I wanted lecturers to know what students were supposed to be doing about these things. I also wanted to show lecturers how much students need to work on sometimes, and how difficult it would be to expect a perfect submission 2 weeks after students get feedback on their first assignment in their first year at a university, independent of on the level of their degree, whether it's master's in education or just undergraduate bachelor. Okay, so here's how the idea of the academic language feedback toolkit came along. I think I need to clarify what I mean by the academic language ability. It's been cited in multiple sources in the literature. You'll see the reference list at the end of the slideshow. To me, ability to use language is much more important than anything else. And the ability to engage with the course content is important. And sometimes when you see someone's writing, you will be asking yourself how capable the students are of engaging with their readings before they produce a writing piece like that. So, as I said, that functional communication is very important to me. What is also important is that I often see students who've been referred to me after they have failed their second year placement at schools. In the first year, they go to schools, but they observe. In their second, third, and fourth years, students go to schools and teach. Every single student in a pre-service teacher degree in this faculty has a teaching practicum. So I was wondering whether students actually see that link between academic language feedback and their professional communication skills that are required in this profession. And of course, I wouldn't do this without the concept of a discourse, or rather discourses with a capital D, as when G talks about it. It's not just creating, it's interpreting discourse. That was something that was important. And it was also the community of discourse users that was important. And it was also that model of a combination of the apprenticeship model, where people become apprentices in a particular profession, but also that proactive learning process where people are engaged in teaching and learning of any particular discourse, the language that they use. And of course, it's impossible to talk about the toolkit framework if we don't talk about an embedded model of post-entry academic language development. There are several important factors that need to be considered here. The institutional context is important, the discipline context, the faculty, resources. The combination of all of these in our particular context allowed us to try and attempt to fully integrate language development into units. We're not talking about the course length yet, because there are just the two of us, and there are 6,000 students, and there are new lecturers, and there is a new course architecture coming in with all the new units and courses that have changed every year in the last 3 years. So 2016 is the first year in the last 3 years where we actually teach some units again. So it's going to be an interesting experience. And you have probably heard about Briguglia's model of language development provision. And as I said, we tried to combine all levels of post-entry academic language development when we piloted what we did. We also wanted to find that very comfortable third space where staff who are academic language advisors and language experts, according to Briguglia, and academics who are not always language teachers are comfortable talking about language-focused or language-rich feedback. This model has been expanded, and the article should come out sometime soon in the Journal for Academic Language and Learning here in Australia, where I thought it was important to add students to the equation. It's very important that we're all comfortable talking about language at a university level. When I first came here, I would not think that anyone but an international student would need post-entry English language and academic literacy development. but now I know it's different. So as I said, the conference and the journal for academic language and learning here in Australia made me think about lots of things. And there was post-entry language assessment feedback sample that Anne Harris generously shared in her article. I looked at it. I was so curious about what we would find out if we actually looked at students' writing and tried to mark that according to the criteria in a sample sheet. As you can see, it has 3 sections. The first one more or less focused on the language structure, grammar. The second one is also that, but it also adds the syntax level to the feedback sheet. And then the last section was recommendations, where students were directed to particular services or resources depending on their language proficiency, identified in the post-entry language assessment test. It was a short piece of writing, discipline-specific, answering a simple question such as, are communication skills important for language teachers or for teachers? Something like that. So we looked at it. I talked to Anne several times, and we decided to go ahead, and I need to acknowledge all the people who participated in the pilot in 2014, including Lily Yazdan-Pana, who helped me with the student survey and data analysis later on, and Julia Gazarian, who's been part of the pilots in 2014 and 2015. So what we decided to do was to give students a simple writing task. We didn't call it a test. They did it in the tutorials, and it was pen and paper. And a week later, the task was returned to the students with a 2-page feedback sheet attached, where we tried to provide as much detailed feedback as possible. This particular presentation is not about the 2014 pilot, but it's important to provide some information as background to what happened in 2015. Lecturers thought the students would be confused by the feedback, that it was too much, that we tried to give them too much information, that they won't be familiar with the meta language we used, such as appropriate register, accurate use of discourse markers, etc. And what we found was that students were not confused. There were a couple of things that confused them, but mostly in terms of, I want to know more. It was not enough. That feedback was given to us, but then there was not much happening afterwards. So as a result, we started thinking about what we could do next. And that's how, as I said, that picture or diagram came to life, because I've been talking to people who've said that the table looked busy, and there was research that told us that that tabled format is not the most user-friendly. I'm very visual. I like colors. We've been working with students who do relate to pictures and colors and colorful representations of complex phenomena such as academic language. So that's what we tried to do. We tried to replicate the same criteria and the same elements in a form of a diagram, which we could call an infographic as well. So the left side, the blue side of it, focuses on the English language proficiency. And in my previous publication, the elements are slightly different because we've been improving and working on them all this time. English language proficiency elements are in blue, and you can see that light blue are subgroups that belong to particular subheadings. And what we we tried to be as detailed as possible, and we focused on the most frequently made mistakes that we found from students writing the year before and in all the previous years. The right side of the diagram is much more complex and much more discipline specific. Again, it was based on the rubrics and lecturers' expectations, as well as on common issues that we as academic language and literacy development advisors have seen when students have come to ask for help or were referred to us. And you can see that we have simplified the language as much as possible. We are not really talking about genre too much, but it's all there. And each of the boxes here may look quite simple, but what we tried to do, we tried to create resources that would directly link to each element in the academic language feedback. That's how the toolkit originated. So each of the boxes here is linked to a set of resources. For example, if you can see that your students have, or a particular student has issues with tenses, there is a short PowerPoint that actually reminds the students about tenses and how they're used, and provides an overview of the tenses commonly used in the English language, and then focuses on those used in academic writing. And then we provided links and further information for students who wanted to learn more. The elements on the left, the names of those elements were reflected in the syllabus of our Get Help hands-on English language program that we run in the faculty. So there were 6 modules, and they all have names such as verb forms and tenses, or parts of speech, articles, and plural singular forms. So if students were ever told that they were having problems with plural and singular forms, it would be easy for them to locate a workshop that would be focusing directly on that particular element. As I said, Monash has finally started working towards expanding possibilities for post-entry English language proficiency development. And one of these initiatives was conversational English programs, or CEP, a slightly misleading name because part of the program was actually providing help to students who needed assistance with their academic writing. I helped train the facilitators who are students currently enrolled at Monash University, and they were available in comfortable, friendly drop-in sessions and provided feedback on students' writing. So we tried to create a mechanism which would allow a student to do something about their academic language if anyone has ever provided feedback on that. As you can see, I'm using the Research Skill Development Framework just to illustrate how complex each of the boxes on the right was. For example, using literature as evidence is a simple box that would require students to analyze the task, focus their research question depending on the assignment, search effectively, read efficiently, use literature in their further writing down the track. So all of these were explained in the resources which were attached to each box in the guide. So what we did, just very quickly, an overview, we added to the existing structure, we added PowerPoints and online tutorials, Moodle resources as a folder to the target units. And we had an additional academic language and literacy development advisor, Julia Gazarian, who was the Get Help coordinator and was funded centrally. We knew the volume of requests would probably go up because of the detailed language-rich feedback that we were going to ask lecturers to provide. And of course, it would be impossible without academics who became active participants in the pilot program in 2015. I ran academic language feedback information sessions for them, where we discussed things like too much feedback, not enough feedback, how clear the comments were. We tried to focus on the feed-forward idea of their feedback. We provided lecturers with the feedback chart, referral flow chart, where we try to identify the easiest ways for students to get support once they have received initial feedback from their lecturers. It was very important that lecturers and students do have a plan of action, that they know what to do next after this language-rich feedback has been provided. We also tried to help lecturers who were not language teachers by providing a plan of action, a comments bank, which looked like that, where we tried to indicate how serious students' problems were based on the number of elements from the ALF guide that drew staff's attention in that particular student's writing. We asked tutors to revisit our PowerPoints if they were not sure what that language element was, and provide as much detailed feedback as possible, because we now know students do follow up on their lecturers' feedback if they know what exactly they're supposed to work on. I have used this guide with high degrees by research students as well, by the way, and they found it very helpful. Even students with very high English language proficiency, there were things on the right side of the diagram that they needed to work on. So we did ask staff who participated in the pilot program about their ways of using the ALF guide and associated resources. And we now know that staff referred to this in their explanation of the assignments and what academic language criterion was about. They consulted the rubrics when they were marking assignments, and they actually reflected on their own knowledge of what academic language was about and what support options were available. So what we are trying to do now, we are trying to work on what happens next. So there will be an increased interactivity, hopefully, when we get some additional funding to see, to make it easier for staff and students to locate resources they need. And we need to close that feed-forward loop. We need to see whether students have improved since the first time they received their language-rich feedback to the later occasions when their writing is being looked at. We needed to see whether this could be adopted in other disciplines. I shared it with academic language advisors in medicine and engineering here at Monash University. So we are hoping that something will come out of our OLT application as well, where we try to include BSEC, or business and economics people, in it. And this is a Moodle prototype whereby clicking on a particular element, like fragmented phrases, for example, you are taken to a module where we try to provide short, easy to use resources that would help students. As someone mentioned before, we do have students who start thinking about it the day before their assignment is submitted, or who get feedback very soon before their next assignment is due, and they cannot focus on all of these things. But what they could do, they could probably go and have a quick look at an annotated example, just one slide with a sample paragraph where a particular issue is highlighted, so they could actually then become active editors and proofreaders for their own assignment. And I've taken so much time, but my apologies, as I said, technical difficulties at the beginning stole 5 minutes of me. So coming back to the feedback that was probably provided to that student, we hope that the student has been working on specific elements. We know that they have attended 3 of our sessions. We know they have also attended a session on paragraph structure and assignment structuring. So we are hoping that this student is actually moving forward with their language development, independent of their studying level. We do know that, this particular student needs a lot of work. But there are some who only need to refresh their knowledge of apostrophe and the use of semicolon, and after that they become much more proficient and confident writers. So this is what it was all about, and I'm sorry for taking so long, and I welcome questions if you're there and suggestions. And please tell me if you've tried something like this before and it didn't work in the long run, because we are still at the beginning stages of playing with this. Thanks, Damien. As I said, one pages are very important to me because I know how confusing things can be. So that navigation, this guide as a navigation tool was important. Yes, the upcoming paper will be a special, I'm not too sure, but it should be a special issue of JEL, Journal for Academic Language and Learning. That was based on conference papers. I presented it at the ALL conference in November last year. Yes, sure. This is the first page. And these are just references which I have mentioned in the slides. The paper will have more. And here we go for the second one. Yes, with native speakers, again, when I go back to the guide itself, you will see that punctuation, apostrophe, and sentence structure would be the most commonly made mistakes for native speakers. Grammatical elements most probably are the ones which are characteristic of non-native speaker English, though plural and singular forms cover subject-verb agreement, because we decided to go with very simple meta language which students would relate to even if they haven't studied English language grammar in much detail. Yeah, so to me, Pela, I think I might have missed something important. So what we did this time, it was part of assignment feedback. To me, it was important that students understood how academic language is related. And I'm not sure what happened. Oh yeah, it's not here, but I have results of the student survey. And more than 90% of them link academic language and professional language in their discipline. And we have data on how helpful students found this, and they especially liked the detail and what they needed to work on. Yes, so what we were hoping to do, we were hoping to provide a tool for both staff and students to look at someone's work, including their own, to see what areas they needed to focus on. Yes, and with the upcoming, oh, I'm not sure what's happening there. I'll need to check on the progress of that. But you know, the talks about the literacy tests for pre-service teachers in Australia raise a lot of questions of students, pre-service teachers' readiness and literacy levels. Okay, so here's the list of references again. And let me know if you have any questions or email me. Please email me. If you have any questions. I know there are so many institutions that work on the same issues and they develop similar mechanisms or resources. And it was very important to me to share what we've been doing based on my background and the institutional context here. It could be adapted and adopted to different disciplines and different institutions in different ways. I was so happy about the feedback from academics who were quite encouraging, and they really enjoyed the fact that they had resources one click away and they didn't need to go and look for them, and they were all available. Where would you fit in that guide, Catherine? There is a box called Other Issues. That's probably where it would belong. Thank you for your positive feedback. It's very encouraging. But again, I would welcome criticisms, please. It's very important to know what's been happening and whether there's something that we haven't thought about. And the idea of professional learning for academics came from academics themselves. They didn't like the word staff development. They wanted professional learning opportunities, and that's why the third space idea is important. That common ground where we're all comfortable talking about things we don't know or are not comfortable doing. Oh, Catherine, sorry. It was about where do you think your typo or your mistake would belong in the diagram? Oh, thank you. So, yeah. Anyway, let me know if you're interested, and also provide any feedback you could. And I think we should be finishing in time for other presenters.